Hello and welcome to episode number 278. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Before we get started, I have a quick favor to ask of you. Do you like the Project Management Podcast? Do you like it well enough to take a couple of minutes and write an iTunes review for us? If you do, then please go to pm-podcast.com/review, or just open up the iTunes store and tell others what you think of the Project Management Podcast. Thank you. And now back to today's topic. If you're going to bother holding a meeting, then you should meet like you mean it. This statement comes from Wayne Termel, who has been speaking and consulting on communications and on successful meetings in particular for a very long time. His latest book is called Meet Like You Mean It, A Leader's Guide to Painless and Productive Virtual Meetings. In the book, and also in our interview, he argues that if you are a project manager, you have to learn how to use today's online meeting tools to get great input, maximum participation, and engagement from your participating project team members. Virtual meetings should be an integral part of the way we work and how we manage our projects, and not to be used as an excuse to answer emails in the background. Also, we are giving away 2 copies of his book. One copy, as always, is reserved for our premium listeners. So, if you're a premium subscriber, you're automatically entered into the drawing for one book. Everyone else gets a chance to win the other book. Please go to facebook.com/pmpodcast, look for the giveaway announcement, and participate. And now, since everyone has joined our meeting on time today, let's get started. Enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcasts feature interview.
Today with Wayne Termel, president of GreatWebMeetings.com.
Hello, Wayne, and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast.
Thanks, Cornelius. It is nice to be back, or wherever it is that we are.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It has. I think it was just before the sad demise of the Cranky Middle Manager show.
Yeah, you have to write more books, then I can invite you more often.
Okay.
All right. So we are going to talk about your new book today, parts of your new book. It is called Meet Like You Mean It, A Leader's Guide to Painless and Productive Virtual Meetings. And we are going to open up that book and we are going to take a look at a couple of chapters inside of it, the technology chapter and the planning chapter. But first off, what's your personal favorite technology or tools when you are holding a virtual meeting these days? And why do you choose that particular one?
Yeah, a lot of people are hung up on the technology. Truthfully, as a business and everything, we're platform agnostic. I don't really have a dog in that fight. I know that I generally use WebEx, some version of WebEx, Meeting Center, Training Center, Event Center, depending on the type of event that we're doing. And the reason is just that I happen to like the interface. It's what I grew up with. I'm used to it. And it works across most people's platforms. It works equally Mac and PC. And most people are familiar with it. I mean, as a matter of fact, WebEx has kind of become the Kleenex of the collaboration space. It's become a generic term. People use it. Well, let's get on a WebEx, even when they're not using it. But truthfully, I'm not emotionally connected to it. Most of the platforms, most of the kind of name brand platforms will do 90% of what you want it to do.
So let's break that emotional connection that you don't have with WebEx. What tool would you use if I told you you're no longer allowed to use WebEx?
It's funny. If I have to do a lot of different things with it, if I have to do training, if I have to do large events, if I have to do small events, Adobe Connect is maybe the most robust tool. It has a really steep learning curve, frankly. But once you learn it, it will do anything you want it to do. On the other hand, I am actually, and quiet as this kept, I actually like Microsoft Lync. The new version of Microsoft Lync does pretty much anything the average working manager or project manager needs to do in the course of a meeting or a collaboration. A lot of people shy away the minute they hear the M word, but the truth of the matter is it's actually a very robust product. The problem with Lync, like all these products, is 80% of people use fewer than 25% of the features.
Yeah, as always.
And so they don't really know what it can do. Those are the names that I'd use. There's a few that are meeting specific. They're not great for training, but they're really good for meeting. Lucid Meetings is a terrific product. Jigsaw Meeting is one I just saw. I get all these people contact me all the time. Hey, take a look at our tool. There's a lot of good tools out there. And as I say, they all do about 90% of the same stuff.
All right. So let's open up your book. You begin the chapter on the virtual meeting tools and technology by talking about an elephant in the room. Okay, what elephant and why do we need to talk about it?
Well, when I talk about virtual meetings, as you know, in the book, a lot of the stuff is appropriate not just for virtual meetings, but can be applied anywhere, right? In terms of how do you run a good meeting. But the fact is that people get hung up on the technology, and they come at the technology from a place of scarcity. They won't give us budget. They won't let us travel. They won't give us time on the schedule. And so we have to use these things. And so people use these tools begrudgingly. And because over 85% of people, this is a shocking number from the people who provide these tools, over 85% of people who use these tools do it without receiving any training or coaching in the tool. It's just, here's your WebEx license, here's your Lync license, try not to hurt somebody. And truthfully, if I am unfamiliar with a tool and I'm not comfortable, and by the way, I'm not happy about it because it's been imposed on me, I'm not going to go out of my way to investigate the possibilities and be as comfortable and proficient as I should be. So not only do we have 80% of people using fewer than 20% of the features, we've got 85% of the people who've never been trained on it. And so, the first time they use it is with innocent victims on the other end.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm not comfortable with the technology, if I don't even know what it can do, how can I be expected to make the most of it?
All right. Then from there, you go into talking about permissions. And I think that has very much to do with training as well. What's important about permissions during a virtual meeting?
Well, far be it from me to disparage the fine folks who design these platforms. But if I were guessing, my suspicion is that they are introverted engineering types with control issues. And the reason I say that is if you look at the default settings in WebEx or Lync, for example, it's I am in control of the meeting. Nobody can join without my permission. Nobody can post without my permission. I have the power to mute everybody. And in some cases, that's the default. I actually have to set permissions to allow the maximum amount of collaboration and input. So if your concern about these virtual meetings is nobody talks, nobody contributes, they're all answering their email, but it's set so their phone is on mute, they can't easily contribute, you can't just have people share things and share presenter power very easily, why wouldn't they go passive? Whereas what I like to do is I set my default permissions so that everybody can do everything. Everybody can scribble on the whiteboard. Everybody can chat. Everybody can, unless it's a huge meeting with, 100 people. But I want to create the environment that I would have in the room. And in the room, my meetings, my training sessions, whatever, are very informal. I encourage people to participate. I want them to jump in when it's appropriate. So I try to set that same environment virtually, and you actually have to go into the setting of your meeting, whether it's WebEx or Lync or whatever, and set the permissions so that it allows for maximum input and participation.
Mm-hmm. So that makes for a much more dynamic and all-inclusive and also, conversational meeting because everyone is allowed to do everything. I like that.
It really is. And I mean, we can go and probably will go into some pretty deep weeds about how do you set the right tone and how do you get people engaged. But if you look at the number one complaints about virtual meetings. Nobody participates. They're boring. They're too long. You hear from the same people all the time, and everybody doesn't get a chance to contribute. Well, if you start by limiting everybody's ability to participate, why are you surprised that people don't participate?
You mentioned whiteboard. Do we need a whiteboard feature for every virtual meeting that we hold?
Yeah, do you need one for every meeting? I don't think you need anything for every meeting.
Okay.
A lot of it is situational. But here's the deal. I think of all the tools available in a virtual collaboration space, the whiteboard is the most powerful. For a couple of reasons. One is on most platforms, you can have as many whiteboards as you want. So you can have a running list of action items. You can have a parking lot of upcoming issues, which allows you to control time and keep things on topic. It encourages brainstorming. So, for example, and this gets into neuroscience and all kinds of things I'm completely unqualified to talk about, but if you are on a conference call and everybody's kind of doodling on their own piece of paper and you're trying to brainstorm, you'll get some input. And if you work hard enough, you'll get some quality input. But when you add the visual component, it's like using a whiteboard or a flip chart in a meeting room. The dynamic of having the words there triggers people's engagement. It triggers their ideas. And so when they see those there, they can build on ideas that somebody had a few minutes ago. On a conference call, once somebody makes a suggestion, whoever's scribing writes it down and it goes into the ozone. Whereas in a virtual meeting with a whiteboard, it's there as a constant visual reminder. And, people who study brainstorming for a living understand that the visual component is really important to generating really good ideas.
And what about the ability to send and receive files during a meeting? Do you use that? Do you recommend it?
I love it for a number of reasons. First of all, if you've ever been on that meeting where you want to start the meeting, I don't have that document. Can you email it to me? Can you send it to me? And what happens is you're giving people permission to go to their email. And if they're not in the room with you where you can eyeball them, once you give them permission to go to their email, they're gone.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of programs, not all of them, but a lot of them have a file transfer feature, which allows you to say, don't go to your email. I'm going to send you this by file transfer right now. And anybody that needs it can access it immediately.
Biggest problem that I've seen is file transfer is as slow as molasses. It just takes forever for these files to transfer.
Yeah, but unless it's the topic of the exact moment, what does it matter? What you want is for them to have the information without having to go to their email and without you having to go to your email and do that. So it's not perfect, but it's better than it used to be. Unless the file is absolutely massive, it actually works at a pretty good clip. The other thing that I like is in regular meetings, very often I like to control when I hand out certain information.
So I see where you're going.
So for example, and it's not about being a control freak, but if I want people to focus on the topic at hand, I'm not going to give them the handout for the next topic because they're going to start flipping through and lose their focus. So let's deal with what we're dealing with right now, do what we need to do. Now, let me share with you this article I found. Let me share with you this new research that we've got. Let me share with you the numbers. You can hand it out just as you would in a live meeting when it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm. So far, I think the one thing I have learned from our discussion here is technology isn't here for technology's sake. Technology, the way at least you use it, is used so that you can take a meeting as we would have it in a normal meeting room, face-to-face, and transport that into the cloud, into the internet, and make it virtual.
See, this is what I was saying before, Cornelius, where people are looking at it as a constraint. But as a project manager, constraints are not good or bad. They just are what they are.
Yeah.
Right? Technology is a constraint. And so people originally look at it as, well, it's not as good as being in the room. Well, you can kind of do this. Once you quit thinking about the technology, once you become kind of consciously competent with the technology, you can focus on what the heck are you trying to do. I mean, virtual meetings allow you to do things just in time. You don't have to take 4 days to get everybody in the same room. You can solve a problem right now. You can do a number of things if you're focused on why are we holding this meeting? How does it drive the work forward? Do I have time to tell a quick story? I mentioned
Sure.
in the introduction to the book, when I was a younger man, I remember going to a meeting. I was very new in the corporate world, and I went to a meeting, and we were in there for half a day, and I was such a good soldier, Cornelius. You'd be so proud of me. I'm contributing, and I'm taking notes, and I'm paying attention. And when it's over, the boss says, all right, that's enough of that. Let's get back to work. And I'm thinking, what the heck was I just doing for the last 4 hours? Right? Wasn't this part of the work? The question is, why do we have meetings? We have meetings to drive the project forward. We have meetings because there's no other way to really get the benefit of everybody's input in real time to develop working relationships, all the things that good meetings accomplish. And so if you look at virtual meetings as a necessary evil and as being driven by the technology rather than by what you're trying to accomplish, you're never going to get the most from them.
While we're telling stories, tell me another story about your company, greatwebmeetings.com. What is it that you do?
Yeah. What we do is we actually are primarily a training and consulting company. We help companies that realize, hey, wait a minute, we just bought X number of virtual meetings licenses and nobody's using them. Or better yet, we're thinking about rolling out WebEx or GoToMeeting or whatever the tool is. And we have this wacky notion that people should actually learn how to use it. And so what we do is we teach communication skills that happen to be centered around virtual communication, and we deliver them virtually. So we have monthly workshops if you're an individual and you want to learn how to deliver effective virtual meetings or learn how to present online or how to use these tools to manage a remote team. You can sign up for those workshops and take them with all kinds of people. Most of our business is with companies that say we want to help develop these skills in our people.
But while you teach these classes virtually, there's also something that you do live in person. And since we have so many PMI folks out there listening to this, chapter officers, you are a public speaker and you are available to come to PMI chapter meetings and speak on the topic of web meetings like you do with me here today, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. For 20 years, I've been a speaker and trainer, and, being in front of a live audience is my drug of choice. I just happen to deliver most of my training virtually, but I love speaking to groups. And actually, with the new book, I'm on kind of a run. I just spoke to PMI Chicagoland, which, as you know, is a huge chapter. In the next 4 or 5 months, I'm in Quad Cities, Iowa. I'm in Bloomington, Illinois. I'm at the Chicago Professional Development Day, the Detroit Professional Development Day. So there's a lot of that. And I love speaking to PMI groups, not just about virtual meetings, but on communicating. And these just happen to be the tools you have to use.
Wonderful. Let's get back to the virtual meetings, to your book, because we're still talking about the technology here. Interactive features, that's something that these tools offer as well. Things like polling, surveys. When does it make sense to use these?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people get hung up on, well, I really like the polling, and it's a wonderful tool, but it depends on the purpose of your meeting and how many people are involved. If you've only got 2 or 3 people on a meeting, I wouldn't use polling because I want people talking to each other, right? You can use the chat, you can use your webcam, you can do a lot of things. And so that conversation is already happening. What happens as the size of the meeting grows is it becomes harder to hear from everybody. And so polling is a great way, without having to speak up, without having to go person by person and kind of do a roll call through the group, to find out, how do they feel about this? What's their current level of knowledge or interest? So let's say I had a dozen people on my project team, and the question was, do we need more training in Microsoft Project? Because apparently, you guys aren't using it worth a darn. Do we need more training? And everybody can vote. Yes, we need more training. No, I'm good. No, I just need a refresher. And you can capture that data. It can be anonymous. So when people are voting and they don't want to kind of put their face to it, it's a good chance to do that. And you can actually record the results. So if you need to go back to your boss and say, hey, 9 out of my 12 people say that they'd really like a refresher course in Microsoft Project, you've got hard data to back it up. And we know how project managers love hard data.
Yeah. You also mentioned chat just a moment ago, and a few minutes ago, you also said you don't want people to leave, go to their emails, lose focus. So what do we do in regards to chat here? Do we allow it? Do we just live with the fact that maybe people go off on a little tangent and start chatting on the side with each other?
Again, it depends on your level of need for control. I do not have very high control issues. I have high confidence issues in that I believe that if I'm doing this importantly and I run my meeting well and I do my job, people are going to be engaged. And so what I do is, because I try to replicate the live environment, what happens in a meeting? Somebody says something, somebody makes a joke, somebody whispers to somebody else. Sometimes it's relevant, right? They're asking a quick clarifying question. Sometimes they're just being silly. But that's how we communicate. That's how we work. Many a truth is told in jest. So I encourage people to use the chat. I don't worry if people are whispering to each other. Maybe they're complaining about the meeting, but also maybe they're, hey, is that the same thing as that? Yeah, it is. Okay, great. Those kinds of discussions I encourage, because I want people to talk to each other. I don't mind somebody making a joke or a wise ass comment in the chat, unless it's really disruptive or inappropriate, because that's how we get to know each other. You know, work does not have to be this miserable, soulless experience. And here's the thing about chat. If you have an international team, or you have a group with a number of people with English as a second language, chat is terrific because not everybody is comfortable speaking verbally in a meeting, particularly if they're not in the same room. And and I've been on enough meetings, I'm here to tell you, North Americans are terrible when it comes to foreign accents. If I'm trying to say something and all I hear is, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't get that. What were you saying? It's going to kill my desire to contribute. Whereas most people with English as a second language, their spoken English is better, or the written English is better than their spoken English. So to give somebody the opportunity, whether because of language or because they're an introvert, or heaven forbid, they actually want to formulate a coherent thought, to think about what they're going to say and write it out. And if they're more comfortable contributing that way, why would you diminish that? Why wouldn't you encourage that? There's also the small issue that if people are chatting, they're kinesthetically involved. And if they're kinesthetically involved, they're paying attention. You know, they're at least at some level involved in the meeting. And I encourage that. If it starts to be disruptive, if people are being inappropriate, then of course you manage it, but you manage it the same way you would in an in-person meeting.
And then, of course, there is the final technology to discuss, webcam. Do we turn the webcams on? Do we turn them off?
You know, it
depends on what you're wearing.
Well, in a sense, I'll tell you this, and I hate to sound like a weasel, but everything boils down to first principles. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we meeting? One of the key reasons that we meet is to create good working relationships with the other people on our project team. And studies show when we know what those people look like, when we put faces to names, when they're not these soulless individuals in Bangalore and Dallas and wherever they happen to be, but they're actual human beings. And I know what Rajesh looks like, and I know what Mary looks like, and we actually respond better. Research from a friend of mine at DePaul University showed that when it's only written and telephone, relationships tend to suffer. People lie more. They withhold information. They're mostly sins of omission, to be fair. When we can see each other, we work better. We build better working relationships. And so when it's possible, if it's just you and I having this conversation, if we were on Skype, you know, and you weren't recording it, I'd say, hey, let's throw on our webcam so we can see each other, and you can see my office, and you can see the bird that shares my office space. And, you know, now, if it's 9 o'clock in the morning in New York, but it's, you know, 4 a.m. in Asia, don't use your webcam. You don't want to have anybody see what I look like in my pajamas. So you use common sense. Also, in a lot of situations, I've got a client in South Africa, and we tend not to use webcam because the bandwidth is so awful. Video eats up a lot of bandwidth. So if it makes sense, if it's not too many people, I like to use webcam because it personalizes and helps create better working relationships. You actually see who you're talking with. In communication terms, you're getting not just the audio information, but you're getting verbal, vocal, nonverbal, visual cues, all kinds of things. So it can add value. If it's a pain in the neck, if it's going to detract from the experience, if somebody's going to be uncomfortable because they're in their pajamas, then don't do it.
All right. After all this technology, let's take a step back here, because no matter how good your technology is, if you have a badly planned project, there just won't be any success, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So where do you personally focus on in regards to planning a virtual meeting?
One of the things that I harp on, and this is the eat your broccoli piece of the interview, because what I'm going to say is perhaps obvious, and yet as a group, we do a really lousy job of it. Take a few minutes before you even create the invitation to the meeting and say, why am I holding this meeting? What's the purpose of this meeting? What do I want to have happen? And what do I want the outcome to be? Well, we need to problem solve a challenge we're having with the Johnson account. Right? We've got a problem with the Johnson account, so we need to problem solve. So what? I need to know who I'm going to invite. I need to know how we're going to problem solve. So you know what? This is a situation where I think the whiteboard would be a good choice here. So I'm going to want to use the whiteboard. I want people to be prepared, so I know that there are things I have to tell them so that they're prepared for the meeting. If you do that thinking up front, and as you know, there are planning sheets and tools in the book, but if you do that thinking up front, you're well on your way to a successful meeting. What happens, though, is it's Tuesday, and we always meet on Tuesday, and maybe I forget to send out the agenda until about 20 minutes before the meeting, and then I'm shocked that people aren't prepared, they don't come in ready to work. We just don't do enough thinking up front.
And you know what? Again, this is no different than in a live in-person meeting where we all meet physically at the same place. I mean, instead of thinking about using the whiteboard feature, you would go down to facilities and say, hey guys, I need a flip chart. Do you have one? And I need some pens. And you log it upstairs so that you have a flip chart in the room before the meeting starts. No different.
It is no different. I mean, the fact is we treat virtual meetings like they're this other beast. But once you get past the technology, which is the constraint, I defy anybody to tell me how it's different.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of what it's supposed to accomplish, the answer is nothing. Now, there are some things, right, people can hide. I mean, the reason people don't play solitaire in your meetings is they're afraid of getting busted. Right? If you can't see me playing solitaire, then I have less guilt about doing it. So there are some different dynamics, but ultimately, in terms of first principles, it's the exact same thing.
Yeah. One big difference is, though, if I have a physical meeting, I have a meeting room. This meeting room has 8 chairs. That's the maximum people I can invite. If I have an unlimited license for my virtual meeting room online, I can invite hundreds of people. So how many people do I invite? How do I make sure that the right people get invited?
Well, this is part of your planning. What tends to happen is because it's virtual, and we'll pick on the bean counters for a moment, we're going to have this meeting, and because it's virtual and our license says we can have 120 people on a meeting, let's do it once and have 120 people and call it square. And the fact is, if all you're doing is pushing out information and you don't really expect to answer questions and you don't really want people to participate, you could do that, but you're going to get exactly what you plan for. If, on the other hand, you might want to say, let's keep these in small groups so people can ask their questions so that we are able to accomplish what we want to accomplish. We'll get more value. Then you start thinking about, well, maybe we need a smaller group. Again, form follows function. So what's the purpose of your meeting? And here's the deal. If people are sitting in your meeting saying, why am I even here? You're probably doing a CYA. Well, I'm inviting them because they might maybe someday care about this. And so, I don't want them to be mad if they're not invited. Think about what you're trying to accomplish. Who are the people who can contribute? Who are the people who need to know? If there are people who are, oh, by the way, you can invite them, or you can push a button and record the meeting. And if they really care, they're welcome to go and view the recording, and they don't have to take time out of their day, which again is looking at the technology in terms of what it can do rather than what it can't do, right? Because virtual meetings have the ability to kind of transcend time, space, and dimension. So what do we need to do? Who needs to be there to really accomplish what we need to accomplish? What is the minimum number of people? What's the maximum number of people? And then if it's by the way, hey, if they really feel obliged to join, that's great, but you don't insist on their appearance.
There's one thing that I like to get back to, because you only mentioned it sort of as an aside, and that is the fact that your book has an appendix in the end with tools and planning sheets. And I think these are important. Folks need to know about these, and they're helpful, which actually is why we have a second interview already scheduled where you're going to come back and we're going to talk about these tools, and we open those up a little bit more and discuss what they are all about. But for right now, for this interview here, my final question for you. Many of our listeners out there, they're project managers. They have teams all over the world, and they meet them on a regular basis through virtual meetings. Give us your improvement tips here. What are the 3 top things that us project managers can do in order to improve our virtual meetings?
Boy, 3 of them, huh? Okay. If I
Make
was
it
going
10 if you
No.
can.
3's a good number. 3's a good number. If I were going to pick 3 things that I would do, is number 1 is send out a proper agenda. And we can get really down in the weeds on what that is. But number 1 is send out a proper agenda, which requires planning, and it's sent out in enough time to actually be useful. So if you want somebody to read something or prepare something or be prepared to talk about something, they actually have time to do that and plan that and think about it. So the biggest thing is the agenda. And most people say they send out agendas, and what they send out are timelines and meeting invitations, which are not the same thing. So you want people prepared, send an agenda. Second thing is you need to learn your tool. You need to get over it. It really only takes half a dozen times of using the tools to develop the muscle memory. But until you do, it is almost physically impossible to function at the high level you need to facilitate your meetings and run the technology. So have an agenda, learn your tool, and then the third thing is set ground rules and expectations so that here's what we expect from you on these meetings. We expect to hear from you during this meeting. If we do not, understand that I will call on you or I will give you every opportunity. But if I don't hear from you, I'm going to talk to you afterwards and say, hey, what's going on? We didn't hear. Is everything okay? Or is there some reason you're not contributing? Because next time we want to hear from you. So it's create an agenda, learn your tool, and then set expectations and hold people accountable. And over time, your meetings will improve.
All right. Once again, the book is called Meet Like You Mean It, a leader's guide to painless and productive virtual meetings. You can find it on Amazon, both as a physical book and also as a Kindle edition. And for all those of you who listen to this interview as we are freshly publishing it, Wayne has given us 2 ebooks to give away, and we are going to do that giveaway over on our Facebook page. So go to facebook.com/PM podcast and find our giveaway over there to participate. Wayne, thank you so much for being on the program here today. This has been great.
Oh, just a real pleasure to talk to you again, Cornelius.
And that was Wayne Turmel on how to hold effective virtual meetings. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. And instead of all the things I usually say at this time, I'd like to once again encourage you to give us an iTunes review. Give us 5 minutes of your time, go to pm-podcast.com/review and rate and review the podcast on iTunes. Thank you. And finally, of course, we have this cry for help that comes from my good friend Steve K. Help! I'm stuck in a project meeting and they have run out of donuts. Until next time.